So, what if you had an instruction manual for life? I mean, a clear, written guide that, even though it's 2 centuries old, still promises to help you find virtue, wealth, and ultimately liberation. Okay, let's dive into this, because today we're exploring a really remarkable text called the Shikshapatri. Scholars have described it as one of the most inspiring handbooks of conduct to ever come out of 19th century Hinduism. And this isn't just some dusty old document. It's a living guide that was designed to completely reshape a society, and it continues to influence people even today. All right, here's how we're going to break it down. First, we'll look at the call for reform that really set the stage back in 18th century India. Then, we're going to meet the author, Swaminarayan. From there, we'll look at the text itself, dive right into its core principles, and then finally, we'll explore its enduring message for all of us today. Right, so to really get this, we've got to go back in time. Let's start with the world that made a text like this so necessary. We're talking about 18th and early 19th century India, a period of just massive social and spiritual turbulence. The sources tell us about a society that was facing what they called crippling evils. I mean, this was a place marked by deep poverty, widespread illiteracy, and all sorts of false superstitions that were leading people down the wrong path. Vicious habits, a deep-seated fear of evil, the whole situation was just crying out for a moral and spiritual reset. And into this world walked a figure who's been described as a spiritual colossus. This was a man who wouldn't just challenge these huge problems, but would actually write out a blueprint for a better way to live. His name was Swaminarayan, though he was born Kanchiam, and his life just moved at this incredible pace. At just 11 years old, he left his home to start a 7-year pilgrimage across India. Think about that. By the time he was 21, he was already the head of a major spiritual fellowship. Then, near the end of his life, he wrote the Shikshapatri, locking in his teachings before he passed away in 1830. And this one story, man, it really gets to the very heart of the kind of leader he was. His guru once put his compassion to the test, offering him a choice. Either let a devotee suffer a single scorpion bite, or he could take on the pain of millions of bites himself. And without even a moment's hesitation, he chose to take all that pain. That kind of profound empathy was the bedrock of his leadership. And he turned that empathy into action. He didn't use violence. Instead, he worked to get rid of practices like female infanticide and sati, where widows were burned alive. He put a stop to animal sacrifices, he created separate spaces just for women to learn and worship, and he uplifted the most forgotten members of society. His whole approach was incredibly inclusive, creating this community that welcomed followers from all different faiths. So how did he make sure all these reforms would actually stick around? Well, he wrote them down. Let's move on and take a look at the Shikshapatri itself, his masterpiece that laid out this new way of life. The name itself really tells you everything you need to know. Shikshapatri. It literally translates to the Epistle of Precepts. It's meant to be a direct letter of instruction, a set of divine commandments for every single one of his followers. And get this entire sweeping framework for moral and spiritual living is packed into just 212 concise verses. That's it. It was absolutely designed to be accessible, a small book that anyone could easily understand, and, more importantly, follow. At its very core, the Shikshapatri is a code of discipline. So think of it just like that instruction manual we talked about, written for the spiritual well-being of every single soul. The whole goal was to take the massive, sprawling Hindu scriptures and simplify them down into basic, actionable commandments that anyone could apply to their life. Okay, so what does this guide actually say? Let's get into the core principles and see how it really provides a blueprint for all different kinds of people. Now, this is what's so smart about it. Swaminarayan knew that one size doesn't fit all. The text doesn't just issue one single set of rules for everybody. Instead, it offers specific, tailored guidance for 4 distinct groups because it recognizes their different roles in society. You've got celibate ascetics, householders, all women, and renounced saints. So, for example, let's just compare 2 of these paths. The celibate brahmachari is told to observe strict celibacy, to study the scriptures, and to really detach from worldly life in order to seek supreme knowledge. But then you have the householder, the grihasta, who's guided to live a pious family life and find their spiritual duty, their dharma, in the everyday responsibilities of their work and their family. 2 different paths, 2 different sets of rules. But there is one rule that rises above all the others, and it applies to every single person, and that's ahimsa, or nonviolence.
Remember that story about the scorpion? Well, that deep personal compassion is written down right here as the foremost and greatest dharma, the absolute highest duty for every follower. This is the bedrock of the entire ethical system.
And building on that foundation of nonviolence, the text then outlines a really detailed code of ethics. It's organized into what are called yamas, which are all about self-control. Things like truthfulness and forgiveness, and niyamas, which are moral practices like purity and faith. And together, they create this comprehensive guide for how to live righteously in every part of your life.
So, here's the crucial question, right? What does all this mean for us today? Let's jump into our final section and see how this 200-year-old code really does have an enduring message.
Because the ultimate promise of the Shikshapatri is, well, it's profound. It assures that anyone who lives by its teachings will achieve the four great aims of human life. Dharma, which is living a virtuous life. Arth, attaining wealth and prosperity. Kama, fulfilling one's desires in a righteous way. And finally, moksha, ultimate spiritual liberation.
And the text wraps up with a direct and really powerful instruction from Swaminarayan himself. He commands his followers to not just read, but to love and vigilantly follow these commandments, stressing that they should never, ever be violated. It's a call for active, dedicated, and loving practice.
Which really leaves us with this final thought to ponder. In our incredibly complex, fast-changing world, what can a 200-year-old instruction manual for life actually teach us about finding our own path to peace, our own sense of purpose, and our own definition of a life well lived?